Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. We have the purpose of this webinar is to provide you owners with more information about the repair project as we've conceived it, and to answer your questions. We have a number of questions from the website that people have submitted. We have some questions that were left over from the webinar last week. And we will open the chat for additional questions tonight. We probably won't get through everything. If we have questions that remain, we will answer them on the website or in a further webinar. So let me start by just reintroducing everybody. We have two people from Barkan. Jason, you want to say a word? Hi.
Hi.
Everybody knows Jason Powell, and then Dana Isaacson.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Warren Cochrane is from CSL.
Nice to be here again.
Dan Liebitz is from Lee Kennedy.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having us.
And Sebastian, tell me how to pronounce your last name correctly, Sebastian.
It's Barbagallo. Also,
Barbagallo. Sebastian Barbagallo, also from Lee Kennedy. And then Matt Spinola, who's from Building Enclosure Science, BES.
Good evening, everyone. Happy to be here.
So we're fortunate to have this panel available to us to answer questions. Warren, you said that you wanted to start off with a statement.
Yeah, I would like to. Last week, we may have misinterpreted a question, but it was about the windows and life expectancy of the windows. I want to explain that the windows are part of the facade system, which entails the brick and the precast. So they all work together. And part of the problem that we have at River Court is the facade has allowed water to come in some cases and cause failure at the windows. In some cases, water has come in at the windows and has caused facade failure. These windows that are going in, with now all the work that's being done to the facade, should last well beyond 30 years. The caveat to that is that you as River Court need to, every 5 to 10 years, and Matt will correct me if I'm wrong, is to do a survey of your facade to identify any issues with it so that you don't have water infiltration. So the windows will last much longer. It's about how we maintain the facade going forward such that the brick, the precast, and the windows all function together and last a very long time.
Thank you. All right, the first question I have is rather broad. I think it's going to fall mostly on Matt, but the Lee Kennedy folks will probably want to chime in. The question is, how was the scope of this project developed? What investigation did you do, and what did you find that might not have been known before? You want to attack that, Matt?
Excellent. Yes, absolutely. In terms of where we started, we started with joining the project team. And as part of that process, we had reviewed a report that was done a few years ago by another consulting firm. They performed a condition assessment, reviewed the building, proposed restoration scope, and that was sort of our basis. That was our starting point. With that, we, of course, absorbed their perspective and then spent some time on the building. Reviewing facades off of lifts, actually opening up some areas, walking the roofs, doing a pretty thorough on-site investigation of our own to support some of the recommendations and or make alternative recommendations that may be deviated from that original report. And all of that was really based on our observed findings and the actual conditions on site to better guide the restoration program. From there, we were engaged by the board to review some active leak locations and address those. And through that process, we also pulled apart added components. So we conducted water testing to start that process, identified the source of leaks, pulled those pertinent components apart, and really understood how the building was built as opposed to, the idealistic way of how it should be built. We identified what things needed to be repaired and remedied. Some of those items adjusted our restoration program and the scope based on our findings. And so our final scope of work was sort of a culmination of all of those parts and pieces. Previous consulting report, active sort of full property investigation, and then some real focus areas where we could dig in and pull pieces apart to really understand the construction of the building.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Could you give some more specifics, perhaps about the mansard roof and the areas that you investigated? This was in the South Tower.
Sure. So the mansard roof in particular, as part of our initial investigation, we observed some deficiencies and challenges in the detailing and how that mansard integrates with the brick walls. A lot of that detailing is less than ideal and leaves various conditions around the property fairly susceptible to water infiltration. When we pulled some specific areas apart, we then learned a little bit more about what that assembly looked like and the fact that there was really very little protection beyond the copper itself to keep water and air out of the building.
There's an underlayment, right? There's another layer that's supposed to do that, right?
Correct. So in an ideal world, you would have your copper that sits on a building paper at the time of installation would have been appropriate. And then that sits on, a plywood that's then attached to the framing. And in the case of River Court, we just have copper sitting on plywood. So if any water gets past that copper, it's working its way into the building and causing damage. And depending on the path, it'll present itself in some areas more than others, but we know that there's an exposure there. So that's an area where I would say the scope increased as a result of our findings, based on the observed conditions and the scope that was being performed, plus the access. There would be no other reason to access these mansard roofs outside of getting to them directly. So being on the building with the window replacement, with the facade restoration, the bulk of that access cost is already accomplished through the project. So in terms of a best value for your money, this is the time to do that work as opposed to paying for this pretty extensive staging requirement across the building again, anytime in the near future.
Do the Lee Kennedy people have anything to add to that? Anything you would like to say? That's pretty good answer for us, Matt. Thank you. Okay.
Sure.
Several people have asked, should we have specified better windows to a higher standard? Again, I think this is probably in your wheelhouse, Matt.
Sure. Yes, I can definitely take this one. So there are certainly higher grade windows, more expensive windows that achieve higher ratings. However, from a cost value perspective, we did not feel that we should be recommending anything that was so far beyond, code required dorm pressures and requirements to go to that level. I mean, you could spend 5 times what our budget is for windows to go towards like really high-end, ultra performing, Miami-Dade type hurricane proof windows. But is it appropriate for the building? From our perspective, we would say no. And we think that the windows that are specified for the project, meet and exceed minimum requirements and provide, the best bang for your buck in terms of performance and maintaining the aesthetic of the building and being designed for long-term integrity.
Good, thank you. We've also had this for Lee Kennedy and Warren, I think. We've had several questions. Here's one of them. Would we get better bids if we rebid the various trade subcontracts? Isn't there a slowdown now that might make contractors willing to make lower bids? You want to start with that, Warren? You're muted.
I'm sorry. So I'll jump in with that to start. Yes. Some developers have stopped their projects because of the climb in interest rates. That is true. Rebidding does several things. We might get lower prices. We might get higher prices. And the part that comes in, it also pushes off our ability to start the project sooner, which means we start later and get into winter conditions, which could be more costly. On top of that, there's something called bidder fatigue. When this goes out to bid a number of times, the bidders just get tired, and all of a sudden they either don't want it, or if they get it, they want to make sure they get it at a good price. So it can cut both ways. It's a risk. Dan and Sebastian, I'll let you jump in on add to that.
Sure. I'll also note that from a subcontractor perspective, none of the there's been no contracts awarded to any subcontractors, so they're still in a competitive situation in the market. So any current slowdown, whatever there is now, is still in play, for the subcontractors that we're going to be actively pursuing now. So so we're still capitalizing on any potential dip in the market between now and when we finalize the contracts.
So in effect, you've frozen in a maximum because people have given you a bid, but there is the opportunity for people to reduce their bids in a competitive situation, even as we sit now. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, great. Okay, a couple people have said, well, is there a cheaper way to do this? And here's one of the questions. Isn't the current problem with the windows that the sealants around the windows are failing? Why not just reseal our existing windows?
So as I said at the beginning of this, it's not just the windows. Some of the window issues are manifest of leaks in behind the brick because of failed sealants at the brick and step flashing with that. So it's not not just the windows. Matt, you want to jump in there?
Sure. Yeah, I would say that, in general, that the sealant around the windows is just one component of many components that are due for repair and restoration. So to spend what would be a substantial amount of money, the access requirements are the same. The duration would come down, but you'd be spending a lot of money to reseal around almost 40-year-old windows. And it would be likely that a lot of that effort would need to be done again in the near future, because you are sealing against old, sort of deteriorated components. The windows are aluminum on the exterior, wood on the interior. There are gaskets between the aluminum and the glass that prevent water from getting into the system. After 25, 30, 40 years, those gaskets are pretty dry and brittle, and water is getting in behind that aluminum and compromising the integrity of the wood in the window. So I would say that a sealant restoration program would not solve for
My
the
understanding,
deficiencies that we have.
yeah, thank you, Matt. My understanding is that the materials that we have now are much better, like for those gaskets, than were available when the building was built.
Absolutely. Yes.
I could add something here too, if you don't mind. It's, the water doesn't just get in around the entire window casement, where we have made some temporary repairs to certain units and did some caulking from where the metal of the window meets the masonry. That's helped in some situations, but not all. We've done some leak testing where we've had a leaky unit. This is a unit with a balcony. We thought it was the balcony. We tested, found some leaks, but we couldn't exactly reproduce the leak. And it took a lot of trial and error, leak testing, water testing, to figure out that after we had caulked around the windows, made some repairs to the membrane of the patio, did some other things, that water was still just getting in and presenting itself in an unusual place from getting by the closed windows, the casement window that goes like this. The water was just getting by because the metal cladding of the window frame itself had seam openings, which we had caulked previously, but also just the gaskets for the windows themselves had failed, and that sort of was like the last thing that we ended up checking. So it's not just the caulking around the windows, it's the windows themselves, as everybody said. It becomes difficult to maintain these windows. You can't buy these, you can't reclad an old window, for example.
Great, thank you. There were several questions I tried to kind of synthesize here. So would you describe the actual process of installing the average window? Does any of the brick from the outside get removed? How does the flashing fit into the opening? How's that all work? I think this is the Kennedy.
Yeah,
thing,
sure.
isn't it?
I can
Yeah.
take that. Yeah, so we will carefully remove the existing window, the casing and the trim around it. We will prepare the rough opening. And we will install the flashing from within the existing rough opening that is there. The flashing that is installed bridges between the existing metal stud framing, the inside wall, and the masonry. There is a space there. That flashing is then covered with a membrane, and the window is installed in that newly reconditioned opening. It is not our intent to be redoing any of the masonry unless the masonry is deteriorated and needs to be done so, and we're not expecting that will be the case.
Great. Okay, we had a question which is basically about cost. Can the copper from the mansard roof that's being replaced be reused, or does it have a salvage value?
It is scrap. There's about 7,000 or so, 6 to 7,000 square feet of the copper roof that's being replaced. About £1 a foot, given current copper scrap costs at about $2.50 to $3 a foot. It's a little bit shy of $20,000 in scrap, so it's not really significant in the grand scheme of it. Typically, the roofer will factor in salvaging that into the price, but we can follow up on that and see where if we can utilize some of that savings. But typically, this is not like it's going to be salvaged in one go. We're taking this out in stages, so it's really there's not really a huge value in this value of the scrap of the copper roof, and the windows don't have any value in a salvage market.
So on the copper reuse, Dick, we cannot reuse that. There's some detailing changes that will be made that will prohibit us from reusing the existing panels that are there. We're looking to update the detailing with working with BES to make sure that it's being reinstalled on a with current standards.
Yeah, my understanding is also that a lot of the copper might be damaged because of the way that it's currently attached to the underlayment.
That's correct.
Yeah, I'd like to add just something, I know copper as a material can last 100 years, 75 years, I don't think anybody anticipated having to replace this stuff because of the way it was installed, and it's unfortunate that it can't be reused. But unfortunately, it's just one of the things that, because the underlayment there was no underlayment, and because of I guess, I don't know, methods, I don't know if Matt could add to that, but it's frustrating that it can't be reused. Or
Yeah, I think I think that the mansard is a good example of, materials on the building that should have a much longer lifespan, but unfortunately were just installed poorly, and are unable to achieve that in their current state. I think as much as it is costly, the board is focused on putting the materials back in a way that they actually do last for their intended lifespan. And so our detailing is very different than what was originally installed, and with the intent that it is going to last a lot longer than what's there currently.
Okay, thank you. We've had a number of questions about building codes. People have wanted to find out what code requirements the new windows meet, and what was the situation. Of course, the codes were different when the building was built, but how do the code requirements compare for the old windows compared to the new windows, and what are the new requirements?
So I can't say that I am a code expert. Our project architect, Dan Nolan, is certainly more of that than I am. But in terms of code, the things that come into play with the windows, we have the thermal value. When the building was built, there was much less focus on conserving energy, natural resources. So insulation thermal value requirements were much less back then. We have wind loading and structural pressures, which are a combination of structural need for installment attachment, but also weather driven. So as the weather patterns change and the air forces change based on geographical region, if you're close to the water, more inland, if there's mountain skyscrapers, all of those things come into play. And those have certainly increased and gotten more stringent. And I think that there was a piece about, are we designing for the future also, not just designing for today. And to that point, today's code is written to design for the future to some degree. The calculations are not, and the structural requirements are not based on current conditions and what we are trying to protect from today. There is definitely a factor of safety and conservative aspect to what that code is requiring in terms of wind pressures and expected storms. So while we are meeting code and exceeding it in some places, that code is designed to last for the longevity of the window, not for just today's present state.
Okay, I got one more question here about the windows. The question was, why didn't we choose to replace the existing Pella windows with new Pella windows? Don't they have a suitable window that meets our specifications, and would that be cheaper?
So we did look at Pella as a potential. BES, our firm, specifically has a fairly negative track record and reputation working with Pella windows, and particularly where we have some larger window units coming together. We've struggled with Pella in the past to accomplish a high performing and watertight condition on some of these larger windows. So Marvin is certainly an or equal, we call it, a manufacturer and product that is very similar in quality standards and amenities that come with the window options. So we looked at Marvin as our primary, and then Colby was a secondary that met all the requirements, was not as equal to Pella, but very comparable, and again, meeting and or exceeding our design performance requirements across the board. And Colby was where we saw the savings. Pella, I would say, is more comparable with a Marvin window in terms of price, so it would probably be a bit more expensive than the Colby.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. We had a request for an organizational chart for the project and a more complete timeline. I'm working on that. We'll get that up on the website soon. So one question we've had a number of people ask is why aren't the owners able to vote on the whole project? Why don't we get to vote again on the windows? Why don't we get to vote on the whole project? The simple answer is that the board has the responsibility and the authority to maintain the building. We did the initial thing with the windows vote because we wanted people to understand what the problems were and what was required, and we wanted to garner some support, which we did at the time. We did not know what it was going to cost. It was not that we were withholding things. We saw, the board saw a range of numbers, none of which we believed, because none of the prices we were seeing were based on either an engineering evaluation or bidding, and that's part of the reason that it took a while to get a cost that was accurate. Jason or Dana, do you want to speak to that?
No, I mean, I think you've stated it accurately. This is part of, it's a governance issue. The board is elected to make these sorts of decisions. They have a fiduciary responsibility to maintain the building, which doesn't, always coincide with affordability, unfortunately. The board also has, the board also has the authority to make repairs and with the best interest of the entire community in the long run at heart. So, I think I've given better examples. I've given better answers in writing, of course. But yeah, I think that's the answer. It's not something owners need to, it's not something that the documents don't, this isn't something that owners would vote on. There are specific things that owners have votes on. And it's just, a major repair project is not one of them.
That's what I was going to say, Dick, is this is a repair project. It's not an improvement project. It's a repair project of existing items. We're not adding anything. We're not, like a pool or a fitness center or things like that, in which unit owners do have the ability to vote on things like that, where improvements come into play. But this, in its purest form, is a repair project.
Okay, so another question, I guess, is a Barkan question. Shouldn't the condo be contributing more to the capital repair budget going forward? What do you guys think about that?
Jason, you want to start there? And
Yeah, sorry. Yep, trying to unmute. So one of the things that's going to come out of this process, now that we have figures and scope for this project, is an update of the reserve study that was last written in 2018. It's about 5 years anyway. And so we've done a lot of things over the last 5 years in the building and updated a number of capital items and systems and things, with the figures and the costs and the funds for this project determined, it'll be easier it's a natural step in the process to update the reserve study and then calculate out the next 20 years of capital needs. And so that will happen, yeah.
And there have been contributions to the reserve study all along for years.
Yeah, well, so, yeah, since, you know, I'm most familiar with the 2018 study. I'm not sure how many studies were done, if any, in the first 20-something years of the building. I believe there was a study that was done in 2015 as well. I'm not 100% sure, but when I first got here, the board was finishing up updating or doing a study in 2018. And yes, the budget has for some time had a portion of the annual operating budget has a portion of everyone's fee go into the reserve account, which is like a savings account for capital needs. And, you know, for many years, money has been contributed. It's hard to know year to year. Sometimes, I mean, what why a number was set the way it was. Sometimes boards anticipate a project in this near future, like next year we have to replace, something. So they try to raise extra money in that year, but then bring levels back down. In some years, it seems reserve levels were flat for some reason or another. But I know since 2018, the reserve funding has been set by recommendations from that 2018 reserve study. Keeping in mind that not everything in that study was fully fleshed out or known. I think the board did what they had to do at the time to complete it, and anticipated some assessments in the near future for some of the higher end items, but didn't really have any numbers or a complete sense of the scale of the work either at the time. So yeah, I mean, and also, reserve funds are set aside and then spent for the anticipated needs. And sometimes you have something that comes up that's not anticipated, and sometimes that's not anyone's fault necessarily. These things happen. Sometimes you want to go repair a crack in a sidewalk and you find out that the crack is from a sinkhole or something, and you have to do more work and it costs more money. And that maybe shifts another project, reorganizes the priority levels of some projects. And, the condo has raised money over the years, but it's spent a lot of money on the projects. I mean, I think the 2014 sort of overall study analysis of the capital needs of the building produced a list of things that needed to be done, and prior boards had done those things more or less in the order of priority. And that was why we had to replace the elevators and the chiller, cooling and heating plants, and a bunch of work in the garage, waterproofing the garage, and then also the fire alarm replacement, which was a life safety issue, so that was critical too. And I think
and two of the low-rise roofs, right, were replaced also.
Yeah, and one of the courtyards, the Roger Street courtyard, was done because that was the leakiest courtyard. Apparently, I wasn't here. That was finished up when I got here, but I wasn't here in the years to witness the leaking. But that was my understanding. So, money's been raised and work has been done, and I don't know if I'd like to think I could imagine that if in year 2 of in 1990, let's say, funds started to be set aside for the 30-year windows or whatever they were, that maybe in 30 years there would be enough money and there would be a need for an assessment. But it's very difficult for condos to always be successful in such long-term funding efforts.
Yeah, I have a very different question here, which I think maybe is for Warren. If somebody else want to say something?
No, it's just me saying, uh-oh.
Okay, well, no, I hope you can handle this. What is the cost of to construct and engineer a brand new condo building from the ground up? I'd like to understand comparables for cost of land and construction projects in Kendall Square in Cambridge to get a sense of the cost for this project versus brand new construction.
So our firm did work on Cambridge Crossing. There is an apartment unit there that was built. The hard cost of construction, the actual hard cost to build it was $216 million for just over 460 units. That does not include any of the development costs, any of the soft costs, anything like that. We kicked it around in the office today, so we thought that the total project cost, not necessarily including land acquisition, would have been north of $400 million on 460, I can't remember, it was 460 units.
It's an apartment building.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Dick, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I just got logged off by accident, but I'd like to just amplify the point about the reserve, if we were still on that, I don't know.
Yeah,
if
go
I'm-
ahead. Sure. Go ahead.
So, you know, the typical contribution from operating to reserve for most condominiums is 10% of your operating budget, and that's dictated by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Those are the standards that those entities want to see for lending. And, you know, as you know, if you were to take 10% of River Court's budget and put that in, it would take so long to generate a kitty that would be able to fund this project fully. So that's why the association is looking at other ways to fund the project in addition to reserve.
Okay, we've had a variety of questions of this sort, and I would like to see if somebody can address it. Shouldn't unit owners on higher floors pay higher costs for window replacements apart from the physical cost of the window? Why do you not apportion part of the scaffolding cost to the window replacement? Units on the very low floors, which don't require high scaffolding, should not be paying for high scaffolding for higher units. Somebody want to address that?
I can address the actual cost of the windows. So what we did was we broke out the cost of each window type for purchasing the window, installing the window, going through the whole entire process that Dan had laid out, from a, you know, AVB, flashings, the whole work, demolition, trim, installing new trim, etc., protecting your unit. So that is done. We factored that in for every unit, regardless of height and where its location on the building. There is a variety of different access methods that we're using. So each one will be accessed in a unique way, depending on the phasing and where you are in the building. But as far as the window assessment portion, there is no scaffolding cost associated with that. That's part of the overall facade project, where the building is, we're doing the facade and roof repairs to the brick. So the window costs themselves, there are no scaffolding costs included in that portion of the assessment.
Yeah, and the scaffolding is necessary to repair the facade, which is common property and affects everybody, so. Question was about phase one, but I think it's a general question. Will our views, if we're in the part that's being worked on, be fully blocked for the full 9 months or whatever for that particular phase? How does that work?
So I'll start, and then Dan can kind of button up anything that I missed here. But it's certainly, it is our goal to not have any staging in place for longer than it needs to be. But the scaffolding will be in place for as long as it takes to do the work at the facade where where the scaffolding is. We're looking to be as efficient as possible while we're there. But during that time, there are certain standards that we need to uphold, which is a lot of it for pedestrian protection and just as well as keeping in heat in the wintertime. There will be scrim and tarping included at those locations. So it will not be the entire 9 months where we have scaffolding up at certain locations. Because that phase, that duration was for the entire phase one, which includes some areas that have masked climbers, not just those areas that have the scaffolding, but it will be for longer than just the portion where we are replacing your unit's windows.
I'd also add to that, that on the north and south towers, other things that need to happen is replacing the cowl wall or the translucent panels up at the boiler room and the cooling tower, which are going to take longer and they happen to be higher. So that's just going to require more time, unfortunately.
Okay, I've got one more question before we open for questions from the attendees. And that is, what would the cost of the project be if we did not use a guaranteed maximum price? I think this is for Warren.
So if you were to go to some other contract method, it would be likely a lump sum, which would leave you open to unforeseen conditions. It would be more restrictive, a lump sum. The guaranteed maximum price affords you a cap that ideally you're not going to go above. So it protects you on the upside, and you get the benefit of any downside where it's a dollar savings, it's money you don't have to spend. Where a lump sum, whatever the number comes in at, that's what you're going to pay. And if there are any changes to that or any unforeseen conditions, you're going to pay additional for that. So the reason we went this way was to protect the association from any upside.
Would you expect for our project a lump sum to come in at a higher price than the GMP?
It could, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we've used about half of our time. We have until 7:30. So let me open the chat for questions at this point, and we'll take questions from the attendees. Give you a minute to put things in. All right, so the first question is, you sound very confident that all owners will pay for their assessments. What happens if that's not the case? Dana, you want to speak to that?
Sure. I hope that is the case. But just like condo fees and other assessments that are levied by the condo association, condo supplemental assessments are covered by Chapter 183A, which is the Massachusetts condominium statute. So in the circumstance where somebody didn't pay or didn't want to pay their condo assessments, the condo association could use that law to collect its fees that are due. So Massachusetts has a very interesting super lien, which is which means that the condominium gets put into the first position in front of mortgage holders when a homeowner owes the condo association money. So the condo associations in Massachusetts are very fortunate in that respect, that they're the first lien holder under the super lien law.
Okay, so the next question here is, can you provide some comparable data, i.e. replacement cost before the start of high inflation to unit owners to analyze, I guess it means. Lots of developers are now putting construction projects on hold due to the highest inflation in 40 years and high interest rates. By talking to developers, this person, they said most contractors literally add a 10 or 15% to their previous jobs, and those are the costs the contractors use to bid. I think this is for you, Warren.
it's partly for me. I'm gonna let Dan jump in here, but in a down economy, you don't necessarily see higher fees. They're more, contractors are more interested in booking work and getting the work. So you're probably gonna get some of the more competitive fees anyway. So that's my take on that. I don't think the prices go up. I think you'll see them get tighter.
My understanding is also that the residential market is different than the commercial market. We've been seeing a lot of stops in commercial stuff.
Commercial projects have gone on hold. But the residential seems to, especially the rental residential continues to go.
Dan, did you want to speak to it?
Sure. In Boston is still in somewhat of a resilient bubble, and the economy is still pretty strong. A good basic measurement is to look at the number of tower cranes that are that dot the skyline, and there are still quite a few. So these are pretty significant projects, and indicators that the economy and the construction employment is still pretty healthy. Is that slowing off or leveling? Yes, it is. And Warren is right when he made a comment that we're, as an industry, we are looking to book work down the road and to keep our people employed. So there is a lot of strategy that's going into this, and it is not. I wish it were as simple as what we did in the past and add 15%. Unfortunately, that is not the reality of our process. And this is just not how we do business.
So I would also add that from the subcontractor market, this is an attractive project because of its duration. So again, as Sebastian said, no contracts have been signed, so everything is still somewhat in flux. We still may reap some benefit. We'll see.
Okay, thank you. The next question, I think we're going to defer to the website, but let me read it. Can each of these consulting companies speak to similar restoration projects in regard to scope, budget, and timeline? And what was the outcome regarding the budget and timeline? You folks all put this sort of information in your responses to our RFPs, and we have that information. I think we have the responses to the RFPs on the website currently. I'll make sure that that's there. Does anybody like to add anything quickly? I don't want to take the rest of the meeting because I know you would have lots to say. Okay, well, we'll address that with the website. There should be that sort of information for each of the companies with comparables and outcomes for projects. Next question is, how is the coefficient? I think this means the beneficial interest for each unit calculated. Is it based on square feet? Can you provide the calculations?
I could probably answer that
Jason,
one.
go ahead.
So the beneficial interest or percentage of interest ownership in the common areas is to set originally when a condominium is developed by the developer. This is not a number that's been created for this project or that has anything to do with the trustees or the management team. This is a number that essentially establishes each unit's indivisible ownership in the condo as a whole, and it establishes what the community is. And if you look at the master deed for the condo, you'll find your beneficial interest. It's also on your unit deed when you purchase the unit. However, if you were to go back and look at the master deed of the condo, you'll probably find the original percentage of interest for your unit. And if the developer, after he established the condo, sold many parking spaces to owners, some owners bought 1 or 2 extra spaces. Each residential unit has 1 unit appertuent to it. It's the legal word. So each unit essentially comes with a parking space, and then owners had an opportunity at a later date to buy. And so the docs were amended with each sale, and essentially many owners have a higher percentage of interest than an equal or comparable unit because they may have 1 or more parking spaces. Typically, a developer establishes the beneficial ownership, I say primarily by square footage. So the size of the unit. So if you have a larger unit, you have a higher percentage of interest than a smaller unit. So the 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom units here have a higher percentage of interest than the studios. But not all, and many units here obviously have identical floor plans, at least they were built originally. Some people have made modifications to their units. And typically in a condo, if your unit is exactly like your neighbors, you have the same beneficial interest, unless there's something else that the developer included in that calculation. And often in a high-rise building, the units that face a view, and in this case, let's say, even though all the views from the building are nice, I think the developer determined that the views of the river in the city across the river was an attractive view, and so the higher up you go, the higher your beneficial interest. In some other condo communities, proximity to an amenity may
But
be
the bottom
considered.
line, Jason, the bottom line for us is that it's fixed, and it's been fixed since the beginning of the building or when those modifications were made. So it's not
Correct.
a calculation that we're doing. It's a number that is attached to each owner's unit, and that's the number that we use.
And it's a matter of public record.
Okay, the next question leads to something that I wanted to say at the beginning and didn't. First off, I wanted to announce that we have the board has made an appointment for the open board seat. Louise Venden will be a new member of the board. And I mentioned that just now because the question is, says many owners would like to have an in-person meeting. Can we have that this week? So Sally Arnold and Louise Venden, the two members of the board, are going to host an in-person informal gathering in the lounge area from 5 to 6:30 this Thursday for conversations with board members and between owners and residents. So you're invited to come by and chat with other owners and to talk to the board members. Okay, so next question is, what happened to the owner advisory committee? What happened is we wanted to broaden it rather than giving the information to a few people. We decided that it would be better to provide all of the information to everybody so that anybody who wanted to dig into it could do so. So we have put a great deal of information on the website. We've put contracts, budgets, documents from the individual from the process as well as from the consulting companies. We hope this is a better way to do it, and I hope that you appreciate that we're trying to be as open as possible and share things. If there's information that you don't see on the website that you want, put something in on the website form, and we will attempt to provide it for you. Next question is, how is the cost to replace all windows for each unit estimated? Is it calculated multiplying the coefficient by the total cost? Well, the cost of the windows is separate from the beneficial interest. The beneficial interest is multiplied by the cost of all the common elements in the building. So this is the stuff in the lobby, the doors to the building, to common areas, the facade, the roofs, and so on. That's all the common property that you own a part of. And the part of that you own is the percentage, which is your beneficial interest. So our unit has a beneficial interest of a little over 0.6%, which means that's the part of all of that common property that is associated with owning our particular unit. The cost of the windows is a different matter, and maybe one of the consultants would like to describe how that works. It's let me just say this. BES has gone through and determined the differences between the windows. So they have assigned a window type to each kind of window that appears in the building, and associated with that, a cost to replace that particular kind of window. I should explain that has been confusing for us and for some other people. The number of windows is not the number of panes of glass or even the number of metal, of window frames that you see from the inside. It's actually the number of openings from the outside. So that can include a number of things that we would normally on the inside of the unit say, well, I've got 4 windows. Well, that may be 1 opening or 2 openings. So the way the calculations are done is the individual window types have a replacement cost associated with them. You multiply that by the number of windows you have of that type, add it up, and that is your assessment for the windows. Anybody like to add anything to that or clarify that? Is that clear?
That was accurate.
Yeah, we have published the list of window types. And we have a listing that we're going to send out that will show you the specific window types for your unit and the prices associated with replacing each of those types. In the case of the first floor units, it's not replacement, it's repair. Those are commercial windows and they're going to be repaired rather than replaced. And that listing will explain that. We'll get that out to you hopefully in the next few days. So let's see, next question. There's a question about one-way Zoom meetings. Some people would like to have a town hall type of meeting, and as I mentioned, we're going to have this informal meeting this Thursday. Let's see how that goes. The Zoom meetings are, in my opinion, best for presenting information, and we had a lot of information that we wanted to get out to you. We wanted to make sure that people's questions were answered, and so we chose this format for that reason. Okay, the next question is also what is the cost difference between costs of windows chosen versus others such as Pella? Do we have those numbers? Do you know, Sebastian?
To Matt's point earlier, we did not solicit a bid from Pella on this project due to just past experiences that on the project, and given the early failures of this particular a building. However, in our experience, Pella comes in at a price point that is at or usually above the windows that has been chosen for this project. I don't know if Matt wanted to weigh in. You guys see a lot of window pricing come in on the facade, and especially Pella versus Marvin. But I think you spoke earlier that we have pretty much we see Pella. There would not be significant savings, and there probably would be a cost increase to go to a Pella window.
Okay.
Yes, I would agree with that. And we did look at for this project Marvin and Colby, and the Marvin was more expensive, so Colby was the most cost effective and
Also,
value add for the project.
We hope to get better delivery time for the Colby windows as it happens. Because that wasn't part of the decision, but that seems to be a benefit of it.
Yes.
Right, Matt? Yeah.
Yeah, there was that component. The other piece was in terms of sequencing the deliveries. I think Colby was a little more amenable to staggering that, where someone like Marvin might say, no, you get the 5 truckloads on one day and you need to pay for it to be stored somewhere externally, which adds significant cost as well.
Okay, I'm taking these questions as they come in. I'm not skipping them, just so you understand. I'm trying to speak to all of them. There are quite a few questions. This one is on an earlier topic. It says the question about higher cost for higher floors wasn't answered. We know that window cost doesn't include scaffold expense. Here's the question. It would appear that scaffolding, while there for facade work, has to be there longer because of window work. If that's true, why aren't higher floors paying higher prices? Somebody want to address that?
Not sure how to address that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't know either. We have to allocate the costs in a way that we think is equitable, and that's what we've done. The fact is that the whole facade matters to everybody. That if you're on the lower floor, if the upper floors are not repaired properly, then you could suffer from water getting into the wall cavities and damaging your unit, getting into your unit. We've seen that happening. We've had water coming in from upper stores. When you pick a fight with water, you lose. And we have a building in which water has propagated quite some distances. So the fact is that even if you're on a lower floor, we're on 3rd floor, we benefit by having the facade above us be in good repair. So, I mean, that's all we need to say to that. As the windows are responsibility of each owner, can I refuse replacing my windows if they're not damaged? All right, the answer is no. And that's because, first off, the integrity of the facade depends on all of the windows working. If you have windows that degrade over time, they affect the damage the facade and can damage other windows as a result. So the expectation is that doing a piecemeal job will not result in the integrity of the facade that we want. Also, as the appearance of the building, if you do it piecemeal, you don't necessarily get the same color for the metal on the outside and so on. And we want to be true to the street appeal of the building. Anybody have anything else to add to that? Jason, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I missed an opportunity to jump in, sort of piggyback on the last question, and if we're not, we can work on a more comprehensive answer offline and put it on the website, but I believe the idea, the individual cost for each window being separated out, is the installation or the location of the window being separated out was intended to be a net benefit for everybody. I think because the scaffolding is going to be there for other work. And also, it may have had something to do with the way we needed to assess owners for their window costs. I'll have to go back and look. And I thought we'd sort of explained the rationale for this at some point earlier when we were given information about this project, last year and stuff. So I believe there's an answer in there somewhere. We could sort of better expand on it.
All right, the next two questions, we've actually answered. The next one is, could you provide the detailed costs per window in each unit? We're going to do that. We'll be sending it to you. We have those reports generated. We just have to get them out to you. Could you provide the overall cost of replacing only the windows in the common areas? I think we could probably break out some of that cost, but I'm not sure from this questioner what the intent is there. We can provide breakout costs for the common expenses. Let's do that, Warren, and put it on the website. Okay.
Yeah, I'm making a note.
Sure. Good. We would like to see the bid forms for each line item. Well, this is maybe Dan, you can speak to talking about the bids that you have.
Yeah.
I'll jump in before him. To publish those before any contracts are signed could possibly be a mistake because they could make their way into the marketplace and things like that. They will definitely be shared once a contract with Lee Kennedy is signed and they have signed contracts with the vendors, and we can publish it all. Dan, go from there.
No, you're absolutely correct, Warren. We're in a fragile point in time, and we need to conduct final negotiations with the subcontractors that we are in consideration for doing the project, and we don't want to lose any sort of competitive advantage by having this information find its way out into the market. I think that would be detrimental to the overall intent of the project.
Okay, thank you. It's the next question. According to the assessments already conducted, what are the additional repairs that would need to be done in the next 10 years? We know something about that. You never know what's going to happen, of course, but one of the problem areas is the Edwin Land Plaza. We know that we have some leaks there, and the strategy has been with that and with the First Street Plaza to make repairs as they're needed based on what's happening with the plaza where the leaks are. But there's no guarantee that at a later time we're not going to need to replace the membrane in the Edwin Land Plaza. Anybody else want to respond to that?
Some of the other projects that we've been talking about are ongoing repairs to the valves in the heating and cooling system, including some of the Whalen units. We have a stairwell pressurization system that has to be repaired and tied to the fire alarm system, just to name a few.
Yeah, many of these things can be done with the existing capital budget. That's the way we've been doing the fire alarms, for example. Even that's $1 million project. We've had the money to do that. Next question is, what is the payment schedule and terms for the contractors? I'm not sure how much detail we need to go into that, but maybe you can speak to that, Warren, again.
So once contract is signed and work begins, Lee Kennedy will be issuing monthly requisitions. They'll start that with what we call a pencil rec, a draft. CSL will go through it with BES. We will address any comments and questions to Lee Kennedy Company. They will make adjustments and then resubmit the pay requisition, but it's on a monthly basis. And it's full of detail. It has all the backup. As I said in a previous webinar, it's an open book, guaranteed maximum price. So we get to see all the backup, all the material costs, all the labor costs.
So every requisition gets reviewed by CSL before it comes to us to be paid.
And BES, yes.
Yeah, right. Here's a question. Can we execute this project in different phases? Can we repair the actual damages and later, over time, the windows?
So we talked about this at the last webinar. If we extend the project out, it's going to get more expensive because of mobilization, demobilization, and things of that nature with the scaffolding. And we'd also lose a rhythm with the subcontractors, and we would actually lose people from the subcontractors, where they would know the property, know the project, and then they would, because of a delay, move to another project, and we don't necessarily get those people back. So there's I do not believe it will save you any money. It will probably cost you more.
Okay. Next question is, how have the board members actually reviewed the trade bids? Is it possible to access the bid forms for each item? I think we've just answered that. The answer is no, the board hasn't seen it. And it's not going to be published until such time as we sign a contract with Lee Kennedy and have the final bids for the trades. What is the percentage of windows that are damaged in the entire building? Where are they mainly located? Maybe that's a BES question.
Yeah, I think in terms of our original survey, the percentage was extremely high of windows that were damaged, deteriorated, compromised in their operation, either didn't open at all, couldn't lock. In terms of the exterior, the gaskets are all failed at this point. Different levels of failure, but all failed at this point and due for replacement. That's our high-level summary.
One of the things is that the windows can be failing without there being any evidence on the inside, because they can be damaged on the outside and they can be leaking into the wall cavity. Is that right, Matt?
Absolutely. And it's possible that you have a window unit leaking and it's actually damaging the unit below more than it's damaging the actual unit that it's located in.
Plus, there's a benefit. The whole point of this is that there's benefits to doing all the windows at the same time. If you repair the outside of the building, replace all the windows, you have to specifications, you have restored the envelope of the building. And if you don't do that, or if you do it in pieces, or if you do it over phases, the areas that you didn't do or the components that you didn't replace will continue to fail. They're already very old and past whatever lifespan they had, and they will just continue to cause problems. And you don't want to spend money on high quality work and not have and not have everything be tight. It's just not the responsible way to do it. I don't know if that's the diplomatic.
Question is, if the former board had the responsibility to maintain the building and they obviously failed in the past, can we sue them? There's no lawyer on the panel. I'm not a lawyer, and we're not going to answer this question. If you have a question like that, I think you should ask a lawyer. We don't know who was the owner's rep on this call. You know, is there, I think, asking, is one of us the owner's rep? Well, it's the board that represents the owners, and the board has the responsibility to the owners for maintaining the value and integrity of the building. So the question goes on. I'd like him to opine on possible savings from requoting. If we asked only companies that previously quoted, if they want to requote, doesn't it seem it would delay things much? And if they lost a job recently, perhaps there's an opportunity there. I think we've already answered that question, that we're still in the game. Because we have not signed a contract with Lee Kennedy, and they have not signed contracts with their subcontractors. This is still a competitive situation and is still very much in the works. Will you ensure that the work is done on time? How will you ensure that the work is done on time? I think that's Lee Kennedy. Dan?
Sorry, Dick. Yeah, I mean, we are, with all of our trade bids, we are buying in project schedules and working closely to identify with our trade partners all of the areas that will allow us to make sure that we get done within the allotted time. So
Okay,
We
it's your job to do this on
Correct.
budget and on time.
that's correct. Absolutely.
Obviously, that's a job of managing things that happen and things that you discover.
That's correct.
Yeah, I can say the board has great confidence in this group of contractors to do this job well and efficiently. Next question is, can you provide a full copy of the River Court community regulations, including roles and responsibilities of the board? That is all on Building Link. If you can't find it, if you have trouble finding it on Building Link, then please put in a request and we'll send it to you.
The Declaration of Trust outlines the governance of the condominium, and the master deed defines the condominium
Can
legally.
you share the exact RFP that was sent to the vendors? Was this RFP limited to guaranteed maximum pricing? If so, is BES open to modifying this to be ordinary non-guarantee maximum pricing? That's number one. Number two, can the board obtain, I'm not sure what the word is, PRIVING, something for the work using an ordinary pricing, using the current architect under the current contract as it is drafted? If not, is BES open to modifying the contract according to facilitate this? And there's a third question. Why don't we start with that much? Do you understand the question? I don't completely understand the question.
Sure. I mean, I think that the question is really geared towards the format of contracting, which I think Warren hit on. We specifically do not dictate what type of contract is used. We work with Warren and CSL and the board to review the options, and we discuss what is the most effective for the project. I would say that in a project of this complexity with so many different variables and sub-trades, a GMP tends to be the most common, as opposed to if you were just doing a roof replacement, a lump sum may be more common in that scenario. But in this, where you have multiple sub-trades and scopes, the GMP contract is most commonly used. I don't know if you want to add to that, Warren.
No, maybe they were
Yeah, I think
interchangeable.
we've already spoken to this. We're running about 20 minutes behind on the questions, so some of these things may have already been answered. As for the RFPs for Lee Kennedy and BES, those competitions, there were several proposals. We chose those companies. Those RFPs are already on the restore10rogers.com site. This is, can you post the cost estimate for each of the units on our website? No, we're not going to do that. That's a privacy issue. We're going to send each individual their own information. We're not going to share the costs for other owners. Last vote for the window replacement was proceeded without full disclosure of the product size, including budget. It now feels like being cheated, is not giving an authority to the board of trustees to make a decision. It is really considered as a simple repair. Why wasn't it even voted before? I think we've already spoken to this. The board has the responsibility to keep the building in good repair. In fact, if the windows are failing, the board has a responsibility to replace the windows in spite of the fact that they're owned by the individual owners. We wanted to consult with the owners and explain the scope of the problem. At the time, we did not know what the cost was going to be, and we promised that we would provide the price at the time that we had a good estimate of it, and that's what we've done. That took a long time because the project is extremely complicated and involved a lot of subcontractors and a lot of investigative work. Okay, the next question is, how much of the current pricing is allocated to scaffolding? Can the association save money by purchasing their own lift for the window installation and using sling, he says sling, but I think it's swing staging for the repointing? Or could these savings be completely passed down to the association, or would savings go only to BES? It's not BES, it would be Lee Kennedy. I heard at the first meeting that one of the vendors is committed to using only union labor. Which vendor is this and why is this? Can you elaborate on what is required to allow bidding from otherwise qualified but non-union labor? We've got several pieces to that. You want to take the union labor thing, Warren?
So we talked last time about this, given the physical size and the dollar value of the project. Knowing that it's carpentry for the windows, the window installers and masonry, there are no non-union firms large enough in Eastern Massachusetts that could undertake this. On top of that, we'd have to find a construction manager that was not a signatory to the unions. And again, would run into the same problem, given the size of the project. Finding a contractor that's non-signatory in Eastern Massachusetts would be next to impossible. So that's why we're with union labor right now.
Okay. Dan, can you speak to roughly what the proportion of the cost of the staging is in the project? You're muted, Dan.
Sebastian, you want to hit that one?
Sure, it's about 10% of the overall project is the scaffolding. I can pull up an exact number and get it to you guys, but that was my last recollection. And then in regards to the question about renting hoists, hydraulic lifts versus scaffolding. So what we've done is we've assessed the most efficient way to access each facade portion. There's, as you guys know, that's a very uniquely shaped building with a lot of balconies. So what we've done is try to look at each elevation and find the best way to access it, the most cost effective and time efficient way to do that. And that's so we are trying to be as cost sensitive as possible in our approach to the building. So I don't anticipate there would be savings by using more hydraulic lifts versus scaffolding. But that's where we're at, and we are still refining our approach, but our logistics plan shows are pretty much, I would say 90% draft of where we anticipate the
And
access.
you're using different kinds of scaffolding in different situations.
That's correct.
Yeah,
And
Adam, yeah.
also, it's also important to understand that there are limitations on equipment that would be able to get us to all the different areas of the building. We've brought in some of the largest equipment available, and we have not been able to access all points of the building. So it's a very unique geometry of the building that requires a very unique approach to access. Regarding the shared savings, there is no shared savings. Lee Kennedy Company will not benefit from any dollars that are saved in the project. That is all returned to the River Court community. So there is no shared savings clause in this contract.
Good. Here's another question for Lee Kennedy. Is the Lee Kennedy GMP all-inclusive, including all subs and trades as part of the work, meaning that the subs and trades contracts and accepted bids also are bound by the GMP?
Yes,
Right. So it's actually Lee Kennedy that is providing the guaranteed price. If for some reason a sub costs more, that's at Lee Kennedy's risk.
that is correct.
Okay. We have about 5 or 6 more minutes. If it is voted again with full disclosure, the Board of Trustees will have more authority to push it forward. I think we've answered that question. We have the authority now. What is the dollar amount difference between doing it all at once versus spreading it out over several years? Is the amount of difference higher than the combined amount of interest and the owners would have to pay to come up with the exorbitant amount of assessment? So what happens if you spread it out in terms of cost?
I'll be honest with you, I don't think we have even analyzed that. I guess we could take a quick look at what that would be like. I just would like to know what the duration would be, other than 2 years. Are we talking taking it out over 10? So.
It seems to me that there are several disadvantages of that. First off, the building would be under construction for a much longer period of time, which would certainly be inconvenient and unpleasant for the owners. As it is, we're talking about 2.5 years.
So, sorry. I
Go
didn't
ahead,
mean to
go
interrupt.
ahead, Jason. Yeah.
No, I mean, we did go through this early on in our process. You know, we evaluated, you know, the option of like, why? Tell us why we can't do this over a long period of time. There are a number of reasons which made it disadvantageous and not even probably practical or even possible if there were a 10-year duration. And also, I know the costs, you know, the approach that we settled on is more, you know, do it as quickly as possible, as cost effectively as possible, and you know, sort of rip the Band-Aid off, and then you're out of it. But delay, you know, extending a project just increases the cost. It reduces the ability to have consistent quality of work over 10 years. You know, boards change, owners come and go. Imagine for everyone's value, extending something this long would actually have an adverse effect on values and sales. No one would probably want to buy in a building that was under construction for 10 years. I mean, there are a lot of things that I think people just aren't thinking of when they ask this question. I've managed some projects that could be done. I managed properties that had projects on a much smaller scale that could be done, you know, in smaller chunks. Because, you know, it was a 5-building community in you know, in the woods somewhere that had, you know, you could do siding on each building and people only paid for their building because that's the way the docs are written and things like that. But on a building like this with the access, the size, the access limitations, the size, the location, and maybe we need to do a better job of explaining it. You know, I think the exercise that we went through when we were very early on in this process as a board with our project managers, you know, maybe we need to sort of do some sort of chart or comparison showing how, you know, what the potential costs would be and how much more expensive it would be and how you were much less likely to have a consistent or guaranteed product at the end. If there's a way for us to do that, I think we will.
Okay, we have just a couple minutes. I'm going to try to squeeze in a couple questions. You described windows as having leaks. Did you quantify that by counting the number of units with leaks and those without leaks? Both situations exist. I think we've kind of dealt with that, but maybe Sebastian or Matt, you could just add a sentence or two to that.
Sure. I can't say that we quantified and or separated leaks versus non-leaks. I mean, we have a log of units that are leaking to some degree that we have reviewed, but our review does not focus on leaks alone. It really focuses on the overall condition of the window and the current expectations for performance. So even if there are no signs of leaking, having window gaskets that are completely deteriorated and have shrunk that allow water into the system are still due for replacement, whether they're actively leaking or not.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question, which is, what did Warren mean in the last meeting when he said Lee Kennedy is a signatory to the union? Does that mean that only work with union subs? I think you've addressed this already, but maybe you could clarify the signatory part. This question goes on. Is that true of all potential vendors who bid for part of the project? Lee Kennedy would be awarded. Maybe it's also for Lee Kennedy. I don't know.
I think it's for Dan, but I will say that all of the construction managers that were sent RFPs and were interviewed are signatories to the union. Dan, do you want to dive into that a little more, what signatory to the union means?
Yeah, sure, Warren. That Lee Kennedy Company has signed agreements with the carpenters and the laborers. And we are, under those agreements, obligated to use union labor for those trades on our projects. And as Warren had mentioned before, given the resource requirements of the project, we needed to have a union trades because they have the resources to be able to man the project appropriately.
Okay, I'm afraid we're out of time. We still have something like 35 questions that haven't been answered. We will address those questions one way or another. Maybe we need to have an additional session. We'll post answers on the website and with whatever other communications seem appropriate, but we'll make sure that these questions get answered. Let me say again that this Thursday from 5 to 6:30, Sally Arnold and Louise Venden, two of our board members, are going to host an informal gathering in the lounge area downstairs in the central tower for owners and residents who'd like to talk to them or talk to each other about the project. So thank you so much for being here tonight. Please continue to send questions in through the website. Remember, it's restore10rogers.com. And we look forward to answering those questions as well. So good evening.